once you've been selected for that position, you have to just go and do your best and then try to explain it to the people as best you can. But you can't stick your finger in the wind every time you make a decision. You can't conduct a poll every time you make a decision.
Welcome to 1850 Main Street. Come on in and pull up a chair.
Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan are joined in studio by Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose.
So you've been an elected official now. Has it been since 2010? Was that your first?
I was sworn in 2011, sworn at shortly thereafter. That's how long I've been doing this.
Well, who were some of the people that you looked up to or have been mentors to you in the area? It can both be in your military experience and in the political realm.
Yeah. Well, my foundation is, of course, my faith and my family. But I found a great mentor growing up, my Boy Scout leader. I told you about him. We just laid him to rest a few years ago, actually at Western Reserve National Cemetery. I got to put on, I'm still a reservist, by the way. I still serve in uniform.
Well, thank you for that.
Oh, I love it. At 45 years old, I can still kind of keep up with the young Green Berets, and so I enjoy it. But
that's why he does it. It's the challenge of give the young guys push you. I love it.
Absolutely. But I got to put on my uniform and go there to lay Colonel Miller to rest. It was very meaningful to me. When I served in the military, I found a number of mentors as well, some old sergeants major, and some of these guys were just incredible. In the state legislature, I also looked for mentors, and you might be surprised. I actually found bipartisan mentorship. There was a man who's now passed recently. He was a congressman. He served with me in the state Senate. His name was Tom Sawyer. And Senator Sawyer, previously Congressman Sawyer, was in many ways, a thoughtful, moderate Northeast Ohio Democrat, and in some ways, unfortunately, kind of a dying breed. But I enjoyed learning from him, and he shared a lot of great wisdom with me over the years. Guys like Vernon Sykes, for that matter, who's still serving, who I sought for mentorship. And then, of course, on the Republican side as well, I've always considered George Voinovich a bit of a mentor. He's an old family friend who took the time to help me sort of connect with politics in the first place. He was sort of my the person that first introduced this idea to me, as at the time I was an active duty soldier, and he said, you should think about running for office someday. Let's see, a couple others, I've enjoyed a lot of reading about people that I didn't get direct mentorship from. But I've always loved Ronald Reagan. I watched the Time for Choosing speech that, of course, he gave for Goldwater. I watched that probably once a year, just as a refresher. And I really love Goldwater's book, Conscience of a Conservative. In fact, I give it out when a young staffer comes to start working for me. I will share a copy of that book with them. I keep a box of them under my desk.
Any other books, like fun for enjoyment type of reading, but that might also be inspirational for folks as well? Anybody, other authors or other kind of books?
Yeah, so I'm reading a book right now. It's a biography on MacArthur, the general, and it starts from his childhood, growing up as the son of a military officer out west, and in these frontier posts where his dad raised him, and then getting to go to West Point. And like a lot of very successful people, I think he was a bit of an eccentric, but channeled it through the military into some productive things. I'm at the point right now where he has overseen the transformation of Japan post World War II, and is getting ready to oversee what turns out to not go so well, the Korean War. And I find that inspiring. I finished a big Washington biography recently, and I was interested with the sort of challenging childhood that he had in some ways, and I think in many ways that helped form him. And here's one that I'm not ashamed at all to say. I've started, and I've always wanted to do this. I'd read different parts all throughout my life. I'm reading the Bible from beginning to end. And I've just worked through some of the, I would say, challenging Numbers and Deuteronomy, which it's a pretty dry stuff, quite honestly, but I'm getting into the more exciting stuff now.
Nice. That's excellent. So, well, I know you just, we're in a library. We're in a studio, but this is a library. And I know, Rob, you just kind of gave him a tour.
Gave him the tour. Showed him a few of the archives.
Did you show him the Washington, the volumes from Dr. Allen?
He paused there. He took a good look.
Well, and so my military unit is at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And so I go there several times a year. Of course, right on the back porch of Mount Vernon. And so I went ahead and bought the Mount Vernon membership. And so when I'm there doing my Army duty, I'll take my evenings and just walk the grounds of Mount Vernon or run the trail from Mount Vernon all the way along the Potomac. Was allegedly a place that Washington did a lot of horse riding. And so I'm a runner. And so that'll be I'll just get lost in what my wife calls Forrest Gump mode, where I just keep running, Anyway, so I'll go on these 8-10 mile runs along the Potomac thinking I'm following in the footsteps of where Washington rode.
That's amazing.
Very cool.
Well, next time you're there, look for Dr. W.B. Allen.
We'll have to hook you up with Dr. Allen.
Yes, good.
So he'll be around and be there for sure. Well, I know you referenced over my head, the sign over my head, It's a Wonderful Life, when we walked in. And I know that's a movie that both you and Alan
love it.
Yeah. Have you watched it this season yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, yes.
My life slows down a little bit next week. Right now we're doing electoral college and all this. And what I'm going to do is pick a Friday night, something like that, Saturday night, and watch it with my kids. Nice. My kids are just now the age, it was a drudgery for them the first couple of years. And my wife would say, you're going to do it again, aren't you? You're going to make the kids sit and watch. My oldest is now 13.
Yes.
And so I think it's going to be a more rewarding experience. But I'm not afraid to admit, and I've been through some stuff, but like I tear up in that movie because you think about what is one life worth and how many others does that touch? The concentric rings that come out when a stone is thrown in a pond, right? And how many others we can each impact if we live our, even if we don't particularly focus on how we impact others, it just happens by serendipity. I love that movie, and I think of it often.
Well, I think it's probably because you've been through some stuff that you can get emotional watching the movie. And that's why when you try to show it to kids, they have to reach a certain age. You kind of have to have experienced some sort of life pain, because people want to say that movie is, Capricorn or corny or something.
Yeah,
that deals with a lot of deep human issues.
The scene at the end where things come full circle for Mr. Bailey, and his brother comes home, and the town is pitching in to help save the building and loan, and all of this that's the part where I tear up. And but we also, there are analogs in that movie for personalities we know. Like we all know those Mr. Potter characters that really think they pull all the strings. They really think they're in charge of things, and they're not in reality.
I guess I would go to that question then. We talk about Mr. Potter, and I know he wasn't an elected official, but
he owned a few. I think.
He owned a few. But I think for the people, are there still good people there working on principle in elected office? Because the one thing that annoys me, and we've talked about it on the public square, we've talked about it on 1850 Main Street, is nothing, when someone says, well, you work for me, that drives me nuts. Mm-hmm. That drives me crazy. I don't like that. Like, we should all be in this together. Yeah. And I believe in Columbus and in Washington and in Harrisburg and in Tallahassee and state capitals all across the country. There still are good people there, right? Serving.
Well, and the response to that, you work for me, is that, yes, truly I do, but you also don't control me, right? Like I was elected to this position because a majority of the people thought that I was the person of character who shared their values that should go and do this. We don't have a direct democracy, thankfully. We have a representative republic where we choose men and women to do the daily work of governing in a representative body. And once you've been selected for that position, you have to just go and do your best and then try to explain it to the people as best you can. But you can't stick your finger in the wind every time you make a decision. You can't conduct a poll every time you make a decision. The wheels of government stop turning if you do that. And to answer your question, there are good people, and I think still a majority. In fact, a large majority. The problem is it's the minority that are purely self-interested. We all have self-interest, right? To say you don't is foolish, right? But that are purely self-interested or self-dealing. Those are the ones that get the attention. Those are the one bad apple that spoils the rest of the bunch. Those are the ones that often, though, get what's coming to them, right? When you see somebody arrested because they have been on the take or whatever else, I think that more often than not, people don't get away with it because they get complacent, they get lazy, they get away with, maybe it's just a little thing here, and then they get it a little bit bigger, and it's like boiling the pot of water with the frog in it. Pretty soon they don't even realize where the line is because they've crossed it so many times. And then they eventually get what's coming to them. I think that if you take the time to get to know your city council, to get to know your state legislature, get to know the members of your Congress for that matter, you would find people that are doing their earnest best in a challenging environment because they really bring a public servant's heart to this work.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America's talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
What question in these interviews don't you get asked that you would like to be asked? Do you leave and say, boy, I wish they would have asked this? Is there any question like that you want us to ask that we can put out there?
You know, we're all the result of our experiences, and we bring that to what we do now. And one thing that I don't get a chance to talk about often enough is how the military prepared me for public service. And I think that, you know, we talk about 1% sometimes. Well, the military is 1% of our population, 1% carrying a pretty heavy burden. But people see this sort of Hollywood montage version of what the military is, and it's not reality. And they don't realize truly what the American military is as far as an organization that develops leaders to think for themselves. And this is counterintuitive for many people. And this is the way the American military has operated for many, many generations. We want every leader to be able to assume the role two steps above them. Because if the colonel dies, the major needs to step in. If the major dies, the captain needs to step in and do that job. And so we really empower a sort of a bottom-up leadership model in the military that, again, most people don't understand. But also in the special operations community, as a Green Beret on a special forces team, we are the sort of the soldier diplomats. We're put into situations where we may be the only American for a long time around, maybe the only one in the country other than the folks behind blast walls at the U.S. Embassy that don't get out much. And so we're the ones that are left to deal with some pretty sticky diplomatic situations, to work with our allies to try to build their capacity. And so that has put me in a situation where I'm living among and working with people who didn't grow up the way that we did, who don't eat or worship the way that we do, and but to realize that they have value and they have wisdom, and that I can learn from them, and we can work together, and that we can accomplish things together. That has made me very comfortable working with all kinds of people of diverse backgrounds, and to recognize that we're all kind of in this together, and that we have more in common than we have that separates us. We focus on the outward things, the appearances and the visual and the way our voices sound or what have you. But the reality is humans fundamentally basically want the same thing. We all want our children to have something better than we had. We want to have a good existence. We want to be able to worship God as we understand Him. That kind of thing. And so that's an experience, that's a set of experiences that I bring from the military that I really do think has prepared me well for public service as well.
And I was reading a news story, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if some things would have gone differently when you were serving, you might not be sitting here talking to us right now. Would you mind sharing a bit of that with us?
Well, and I was uncomfortable talking about this for a long time. And it was my teammates' family that asked me to. They said, share this story. And so I'll share it the way that I have, and my wife has gotten comfortable with us talking about it. Again, sort of a deeply personal thing. It should have been me, right? Call it survivor's guilt or whatever else is kind of the title of this story. But when I deployed to Iraq, one of my teammates was a guy from not far from here, Cuyahoga Falls. He was a SWAT officer, tactical police officer in the Cuyahoga Falls Police Department, and he said, well, you know what? I know how to kick doors and shoot bad guys. I bet you the Green Berets could use me. And so he became a member of the Special Forces after September 11th. He ended up deployed with me. And in Iraq, we each had our sort of different roles. There's only 12 guys on a Special Forces team, so you got to wear a lot of different hats. And one of my jobs was I always drove the lead truck in our convoys. I knew my way around, pretty good vehicle operator. And so I was the explosives tech for my team. And so I thought, if I'm up front, if we encounter an explosive device, I'm closer to it to be able to defuse it or evaluate it or go around it or whatever. And so I always drove our lead vehicles. Well, I was also in charge of our team budget. We don't operate with big supply convoys and, big Army logistics. We had to buy things off the local economy. So we had a safe full of U.S. currency, right? And then I had to account for that, and I would get an unannounced call from the fiscal officer to come up and show my receipts, show my book, show my ledger. So one day I got that call. No big deal. Grabbed my ledger out of the safe, got on a helicopter, flew up to Baghdad, and was sitting there with the fiscal officer when I got a knock on the door and says, "Your team's just come under attack. Would you jump in this helicopter with me?" And I recognized the guy that was asking was a general. I said, "Yes, sir." So I jumped in the helicopter. We went over to the ops center, and I'm standing there with like a long beard and a backward Ohio State baseball cap, and because we dressed, we nondescriptly. And so I'm standing there in this ops center with these big video screens watching what we called Predator Vision, the drone footage, and they're pointing to me and they're saying, "Who's that guy that's being carried to the helicopter? What truck is that on fire over here?" And I was trying my best to answer these questions, but what I realized is that two of my teammates had been killed. And one of them had been Dan Crabtree, and it pretty quickly dawned on me what had happened. When the team was called out to support a neighboring team and what we would call, mutual aid, like law enforcement does mutual aid, one of our neighbor teams had gotten into a little gunfight, and so we were going to go out to help them, and I wasn't there to drive the lead truck. Nobody else had ever driven that truck before. In fact, Lauren's photograph was taped to the dashboard when that truck was blown up. The team sergeant said, "Who's driving LaRose's truck? Who's driving Frank's truck?" And Dan Crabtree, like Isaiah, said, "Here am I, send me." Right? He said, I'll jump in Frank's seat, no big deal. And any other day, it would have been me in that seat. And on a dusty roadside in Wasat Province, Iraq, Dan Crabtree, Sergeant First Class Dan Crabtree, left behind a loving wife and a wonderful 1-year-old little girl who's now a nursing student. Her name is Mallory. She actually gave the Wreaths Across America speech at the State House this year. Special young lady, talking about her father's legacy, a father who she really never knew because she was only one. And that sort of survivor's guilt stuff about why was it him and not me was something I struggled with. As a person of faith, I prayed a lot about it, and I still haven't made much sense of it. But I can tell you this, what I believe the Lord has told me is that I have work yet to do. And Dan's work was done, so he was called home. And I think that public service is that work. And so I try to honor Dan in the work that I do in public service, and as long as the Lord will let me do it, as long as Lauren will let me do it, then that's what I'm going to keep doing.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.